you clods!
He's too far out! We can't reach him!
With my last breath, I curse Cyberpunk!
Who disrupts my coronation?
Everyone has been destroyed because of this freak! I won't allow it! These babies just saved this lame fest party!
What's going on? You are listening to ThisWeekInGeek.net. I'm your host, Mike the Birdman, and well, you may notice that I'm flying solo today. That's because Alex is having some repairs done to his apartment today, so unfortunately, due to construction and everything else, he will not be around today, but we will have an extended review of the next gen update of Cyberpunk 2077 after the news segment today. And it's going to be a long one. It's like 20 minutes, but if you've been sitting on the fence about Cyberpunk, perhaps Alex will give you a little bit more insight into what has been done in the next generation versions of these games for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and moving forward. So yeah, it's kind of weird. I haven't done a solo show in at least a couple of weeks anyway, maybe a month or more. I don't know. Feels like it could have been longer. I don't know. It's been a while. But anyway, what's going on with me? Well, I kind of took a little bit of time for myself, and I started going back to my old PlayStation catalog of games that I never got around to beating. And one of the games that I didn't get a chance to beat when it first was released, though I did order it the first day that it came out, was Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. And I finally beat that the other day on the PlayStation 5, and that was a pretty cool experience, all things considered. I beat the game on story mode because I'm not a sadist, and I don't know, I don't think I'd really get in the Souls-like games again. I mean, I have owned a couple of them. I know I've got Dark Souls 3, and I can't even remember how I got it. Either I got sent it for review and I just never got around to it, or it was offered via one of the services like, hey, add to your collection or whatever, and I just never got around to it. So yeah, I had a lot of fun playing through that. Pretty big Star Wars fan, as you all may well know, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens when the sequel gets more formally announced and presented. My guess is, like, for Star Wars Day this year, either May the 4th, or whenever Obi-Wan comes out on Disney Plus, I think, on May 24th or something like that. Either way, same day that Star Wars A New Hope came out back in 1977, that's when we're supposed to see the prequel series for Obi-Wan with Ewan McGregor. Other than that, I'm trying to decide what's the next game to go back. I started playing Persona 5, Dancing in Starlight, which is like the Persona dancing games. I'm not very good at them, which is weird because normally I'm really good at like things like Guitar Hero, but I guess this is closer to, if you remember the old game on the PlayStation, I think this was in arcades too. It was called Bust a Groove. Where you're dancing around, and I wasn't very good at that one either, yet I was really good at Parappa the Rapper and Jammer Lammy. I'm actually really surprised those franchises have never made a comeback. Last time we saw Parappa was in the PlayStation 4 remaster and in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, which now with all the new characters from all like the Souls games, Aloy from the Horizon Zero Dawn series, Spider-Man. There's a lot of characters that could show up in those games that I think would be pretty cool. Maybe you could play as Joel and Ellie as like a combo team or something like that. That could be a lot of fun. I don't know. I would play it if they offered it. And I've been obviously playing a lot of Halo Infinite. Been spending a lot of time on the Halo subreddit. In fact, if you guys have been following my social media, which is at Birdman.and at BirdmanTwig, I take a lot of photos in game for Halo. I'm still waiting for the full Forge mode to come out. I'm really hoping we get a fully fledged photography mode like Ghost of Tsushima or Mass Effect Legendary Edition. I started playing with it around a little bit last night in Spider-Man Miles Morales, which has a really good photo system in there too, but I just haven't gotten the hang of it yet like I did with the original Spider-Man. But it was mostly just taking really cool selfies every now and again. But speaking of Halo, this coming week, so on March 4th is when we're closing our contest. So if you want to win 3 months of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, then all you have to do is email feedback at ThisWeekInGeek.net and tell us your favorite Halo memory. Could be something how you skipped work. Could be like me where I got nailed on the CBC for skipping class. Or it could be, I don't know, maybe you met your boyfriend, girlfriend, or whoever. Maybe you met your best friend on Halo 2. In fact, I've got a few stories about Halo 2 I really can't talk about. Let's just say I had some really interesting voice messages left for me at one time in the original Xbox Live days on the original OG Xbox. I wonder whatever happened to them. I hope they're okay. Other than that, I just been kind of hanging out, really. Not a whole lot to report here at Casa de Birdman. Yeah, just kind of enjoying life. Still doing my college courses. I start my next one like in May. I'm just wrapping my one up now, which is pretty exciting. I actually attended my first writer's circle the other day, and I was like presenting my my Cyberpunk romance story that I talked about, I think late last year on the show. And that went over tremendously well. And I had like the entire room was like enthralled. So that was really, really something kind of special there. So really looking forward to seeing what happens with that as I hopefully evolve the story that I started there. I may change some of the background details, because my original protagonist was Turkish and Greek, and I had her name was Cassia, and I know that translates from Greek to cinnamon, and I can't remember what I think her last name is Yiltz or something along those lines, but it translates to leader of men, I want to say. I may actually change the character to become indigenous, so I can kind of tap into that urban indigenous futurism, which is a thing in one of my favorite role-playing games of all time, which is Shadowrun, which I'm actually running a local group here in Guelph. We actually start our first, our session 0 tomorrow to get them kind of acclimatized to the 6th world, such as it may be. Which reminds me, as a programming note, there is going to be a slight break in between episodes of Stargate SG-1 TWIG. Alex is at his mom's this week, so we were going to record tomorrow, but that's been scrapped till the following week, and then I'll have that edited out as quick as we can, and then we'll continue every other week until we get going there. I know we do intend to get Future Imperfect back up off the ground, but we will talk about that a little bit later. So, I've rambled on long enough. So, things you're going to hear in this show, we're going to take a look at a movie called Beans from MVD, and that's about the Oka crisis that happened in Canada in the early 1990s, and it was a standoff between indigenous populations and the population of a town called Oka, where they wanted to expand a golf course, but that golf course was on Indian burial ground and sacred land, and you can guess how well that turned out. But it's a surprisingly good movie, but I'll save that for my review a little bit later on. In addition to that, we also are going to be looking at another Indigenous-focused game, which is called Never Alone, the Arctic Collection, which is about a northern Indigenous community, and it's about a little girl and her little fox spirit. And if you've been following my Instagram and my Twitter, the fox has become a very important creature to me spiritually in the last little bit. So if this is a divine sign from Creator, I don't know, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised at this point. So anyway, we're also going to take a look at Alex's extended look at Cyberpunk 2077 for the next generation upgrades, plus all the news, stupid crap that happened around the world this week. And I guess it kind of goes without saying, we here at TWIG definitely stand with the people of Ukraine. Obviously, we do wish for the conflict to come to a quick end on the side of the Ukrainian people. And it was something kind of interesting before I transition out into something else here. I saw a video on Twitter, and I've seen it on Reddit a few times, and it was a Ukrainian grandmother. And the confrontation went something like this. She came across a Russian soldier, and she said, "I hope you carry sunflower seeds in your pocket." And the soldier's like, "Wait, why?" And she says, "So when you die on Ukrainian soil, beautiful sunflowers will spring from your body." Try and tell me that isn't the most metal thing you've ever fucking heard. And then it turns out President Zelensky, the guy who's still sitting in Kyiv right now as I record this, being under attack, that's the voice of Paddington Bear in the Ukrainian dub of Paddington Bear. So figure that one out, folks. It's an interesting time to be alive, but it's a scary one too, because we don't know how this is going to turn out. So legitimately, I hope to any listeners that are out there from the Ukraine, I know we have a couple, I hope you're okay. I hope your family's safe. I hope things come to a quick end, and I know that the world is with you. I wish we could do more. I wish we were doing more, to be quite frank with you. But know that the world will help you rebuild. The world will stand with you as best we can. And if I was in charge, things would be different. We would definitely take a more active hand other than just sending supplies and equipment. But I understand it's a fluid situation that I certainly am not qualified to really speak upon any further. Just as an armchair strategist, that's all I can really send out is the best wishes into the world, and know that at least my city of Guelph is doing its part to stand with you, and I'm thankful for that. So with that out of the way, let's continue the show that we were planning on doing. So let's take a listen to my review of Beans from MVD. We will be back, guys, right after this.
My name is Degahandekwa.
Degahandekwa. Or you can call me Beans. Everybody does.
The occupation of an ancient pine forest on the Mohawk Reserve of Ganazadage is in its 4th month. The people here are protecting a burial ground from being leveled for a golf course expansion by the neighboring town of Oka.
What's happening? Mom! Daddy!
What is going on here?
We're taking the bridge.
Oh, hi! You want to use this bridge? This is Indian land!
Honey, you need to be able to stand up for what's important to you.
Hey guys, this is Mike the Birdman here. We're going to be taking a look at a movie that came to us from our friends over at MVD. I'm talking about the movie Beans. This movie was screened at the Toronto International Film Festival back in 2020. It has won a couple of awards since that time. And Beans is a story about Tegahandakwa, who is known as Beans in the movie. And this tells the story of an indigenous child coming up during the Oka crisis. Now, if you don't know what that is, allow me to set the scene for you. In the early 1990s, there was a indigenous tribe that was near the town of Oka in Quebec. And town of Oka wanted to build a golf course. Unfortunately, that golf course expansion would go into an ancient pine forest that had Indian burial ground and Indian sacred land there. You can guess about how well this went. Anyway, this crisis endured a hell of a lot longer than it should have. There was an armed standoff. There was a lot of really high racial tensions in this country. And it's something that I knew about as a child but didn't quite understand what had happened because I was literally like 10 at the time when this happened. This happened in like the early 1990s. And Beans is a story about this little girl, Tega Handakwa, coming up during that time with her mother Lily, her sister, and her dad. And it's all the things that happened during that summer to her that basically make her grow up a hell of a lot faster than she should. And it's sort of like a peek into a different side of reservation life you wouldn't get necessarily in a show like, say, Reservation Dogs or something more humorous like North of 60. Not to say there aren't some funny parts in this, there are, but it's a coming-of-age story that I think's really important to be told. The writer-director Tracy Deer based a lot of this on some of her personal experience. There's actually a lot of behind-the-scenes featurettes for this, although they're terribly short, if I did have one major complaint. At one point when she's directing the extras during one scene where they're hurling rocks and racial slurs at the car, and she starts breaking down crying because this drew from a very hard part of the trauma in her life. And it's a very powerful movie. I didn't expect it to hit as hard as it did, and that may be because I'm exploring my own Indigenous heritage now as I go into my 40s now. Whereas this girl, Tega Handakwa, this is all she's really known, is res life and starting to branch out into the world as she wants to go to a prestigious school in Montreal. And other kids on the res don't necessarily get that. They're like, why do you want to go to that white school? And it asks a lot of important questions, but it also puts you in the shoes of this preteen girl as she navigates this incredibly hard summer. I will tell you, there are some trigger warnings for racism. There is a sexual assault in the movie. At one point, it doesn't really go anywhere, but it's still a thing that unfortunately does happen, and it was sort of like, okay, didn't see that one coming. And it's rough, but it's an important story that I think does need to be heard and definitely needs to be watched, especially if you care about the Canadian history that's happened before, and as we as Canadians move towards the path of Truth and Reconciliation Day, which is supposed to be on September 30th of every year. This will be the second year. Hopefully things will be a little bit different than they were this year, but I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see. So ultimately, can I recommend this movie? To remove myself from this is difficult, but I do say yes. It's a powerful movie about a little girl who really grows up fast, trying to find her place in the world and trying to find pride within that by recognizing who she really is, not being known as Beans anymore, but taking her name as Tega Handakwa. And I guess I'll say this before I go here. There's a lesson I learned recently from a virtual lodge, which is a virtual healing lodge in Indigenous culture. And one of the elders told me this. Each of us has three names. There's the name that our European names, like for example, I was originally Mike Dodd. And then your second name comes to you later in life, which in my case is Mike Ashqui, which is my birth name. And then there's your third name, which is your spirit name, or your true name. So Beans is giving up the colonizer name and embracing a new identity. And that's important. And I think if you've ever had any curiosity about Indigenous culture, if you want to know more about the dark history of racism in this country, but if you want to see it through a child's eyes, then this is important. And this is a movie I really think that should be showing in schools, especially since we approach Truth and Reconciliation. So yeah, Beans from MVD is one of the best movies I've seen in a really long time. And if you want to learn more about this, I invite you to take a view of this. I know you can get this across a variety of mediums. I know I saw this posted recently on Facebook. You can get it on Apple right now, really cheap. Totally recommend it. It's worth taking a look at.
Do you understand what is at stake here? If they hate us, we suffer.
Oh my God.
Get on the floor now. Get on the floor!
Why did you help us?
If we want respect, we have to behave respectfully.
The Prime Minister of Sweden visited Washington today, and my tiny little nipples went to France.
Gossip, rumors, panic in the streets. We're lucky.
This Week in Geek
News. Hey guys, welcome back to ThisWeekInGeek.net. I'm your host, Mike the Birdman. Well, let's start things off on a fairly serious note. Although the headline sounds funny, this is actually a fairly important issue, and I really want to get it out there since I was made aware of it on Twitter just a couple of days ago. So this story comes courtesy of boingboing.net. So the headline sounds funny, but follow me here. So Chuck Tingle, the author of Pounded in the Butt by My Own Butt, buys Texas governor's website to prove love is real. Earlier this week, Texas Governor Greg Abbott published a letter urging the state's Family and Protective Services to investigate any reported instances of trans or gender nonconforming youth existing or of adults loving and supporting their children who are trans and or gender nonconforming. He is able to do this because of August 2021, Texas law has designated pretty much any method of addressing any sort of gender dysphoria as a criminal act of quote-unquote child abuse. Greg, and then there's a tweet I'm just going to read partially here. It says, Greg Abbott has officially directed Family and Protective Services to investigate all trans children in Texas and prosecuting their parents as child abusers. He's also instructed all teachers, doctors, and caregivers to begin reporting any trans students that they see. And then there's a letter that kind of outlines all this stuff. So, meanwhile, Chuck Tingle, walking manifestation of all unbridled optimism, and acclaimed writers such as literary classics such as Space Raptor Butt Invasion, Bigfoot Pirates, Haunt My Balls, Pounded in the Butt by My Own Butt, Slammed in the Butthole by My Concept of Linear Time, Pounded in the Butt by the Sentient Manifestation of My Own Ignorant Climate Change Denial, and of course, Pounded in the Butt by My Own Book, Pounded in the Butt by My Own Book, Pounded in the Butt by My Own Book, Pounded in the Butt by My Book, Pounded in the Butt by My Own Butt. Notice the web domain located under governorabbott.com was curiously unused and thus available for sale. So Mr. Tingle bought the site and turned it into a resource for trans charities pushing back against this absolutely inhumane act. Do you like to think you're do you like saying you're for small government than building a hate-based platform around exerting power over other people's whose lives are none of your business? I do too. Do you claim to care about your community but waste funds on border wall projects that statistically don't work and are ethically abhorrent? I do too. Have you stared into the cosmic abyss and heard the moans of 1,000 collapsing stars, shaking and drooling as time stretches into an infinite gaping maw? Shal chal shuk chagal. If you're not frothing at the mouth while being belligerently hatred and ignorant bigotry, then maybe supporting Greg Abbott isn't for you. If something seems off about this website, it's possible you may actually be a decent human being. If you find yourself questioning the leadership of someone so committed to hatred, and consider donating to these charities, the Transgender Law Center, Trans Life Lifeline, and Sylvia Riviera Law Project. Chuck Tingle once again proving that love is real and that devils don't win. On a related note, then there's just something stupid. This is fucking terrifying. In the year 2022, that this governor, this fucking ghoul, can do this. Like, you're a doctor, you're a caregiver, you're a teacher, you're expected to report trans youth. Man, get fucked in every conceivable way possible, you inhumane piece of garbage. Trans lives are human lives. Their lives matter. Fuck you and everybody who thinks differently than that. They're fucking people, man. Like, their lives aren't hurting yours. I mean, I've got a few friends that are transgendered and gender nonconforming, And hearing their experiences has definitely opened up my eyes to living through a different experience. And they should be allowed to live their best life, to be whoever they choose to be under whatever circumstances they want to be. And we have no say in it. We should only ever be supporting of that. And some people know themselves very, very, very young. Some people don't. Some people, it takes a lifetime to kind of figure out. And I think we should just be supportive, give them whatever resources they need, give them all the help and love that they need while they explore their identity, and whether they go to explore these other options, that should be allowed. Like, there shouldn't be any outside interference, especially from a government body. This isn't fucking Russia, where they literally say there are no gays in Russia. I've seen that quote pop up a few times in the last few days. Or in certain states in the United Arab Emirates where homosexuality is a crime and stuff like that. I can only imagine what it would be like for a transgendered person over there. No, man. This is North America. Get the fuck out. Like, if you're not going to be a decent human being, get out. In fact, if you don't like the trans community, if you don't support LGBTQ plus people, stop listening to this podcast. Seriously, fuck right off. I want to believe that we have good people out there. And I know there are good people in Texas too. I've got several friends that are down there. And while our alignments don't always line up on things like gun rights and all that stuff, that aside, I know these people aren't monsters, and they would welcome these people into their homes, in their lives, as family, as brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, whatever. Just let people be. And I guess that's what I want. So, Chuck Tingle, thank you for taking the piss out of this Greg Abbott guy. He's a fucking monster, and I hope logic prevails at some point, and this somehow gets overturned or something, because that's fucked up, frankly. In continuing with more amusingly fucked up news, this story comes courtesy of Kotaku.com. Gaming Awards show host gets on stage and says, "Fuck Bobby Kotick." The Activision CEO got no love from Kinda Funny's Greg Miller during the DICE Awards. This took place last week. So the DICE Awards, the video game industry's Oscar equivalent, was held last night. This was last week. A bunch of games took home trophies, including Haze Light's Studios' It Takes Two, which won its second Game of the Year award, but arguably that wasn't the night's biggest news. Now, what folks were waiting to find out was what kind of mess might happen on stage. Earlier in the day, before the event unfolded, Kinda Funny co-founder and industry hype man Greg Miller stated on Twitter he would use his airtime in front of the industry's top developers to make enemies. Well, he said something that wound up getting applause from the crowd. Bethesda executive producer Todd Howard opened the night with a monologue about the turmoil and uncertainty in the world, particularly as horrific events unfold in Ukraine. He talked about Wordle and The Sims before handing the stage over to Miller and co-host Jessica Chobot. Things got spicy from there, as Miller called out Activision CEO Bobby Kotick. After joking about Cyberpunk 2077, Metroid Dread, and NFTs, Miller said, "Fuck Bobby Kotick," to claps and cheers from the audience. It was a brief but critical moment, especially since the Game Awards host Jeff Keighley was criticized for refusing to overtly name names in December. Generally, while many visible figures in the game industry are willing to decry the general idea of harassment or espouse the values of diversity, it's much rarer to hear any specifics about what those remarks are in response to or who the bad actors causing the issues might be. It doesn't mean that such remarks can't be thoughtful or incisive. Earlier at DICE, EA Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer Laura Meal didn't mince words when she said leaders who fall short of basic standards must go, but it's definitely unusual to attach names like Miller did, especially on such a public platform. Miller told Kotaku via email he was prepared to debate the show's producers and writers about including such a clear critique in their speech. He not only didn't have to, but it was also praised for being so upfront. As we got closer and closer to the DICE Awards, I knew that I wanted the monologue to say something real about both NFTs and the abuse that's been allowed to run rampant in the industry, Miller said. I had seen Jeff get blowback from the Game Awards for not naming names, so I was prepared to fight to get stuff in like this. As for the crowd, I don't think they expected us to go so hard, Miller continued. There was a usual smattering of laughs and groans, but there was an addition of stunned silence. Everyone who approached me afterwards said they loved it and stood by the message. No one told me I was wrong. Kotaku has reached out to Activision Blizzard for comment. Miller isn't wrong. The malign CEO has been in the headlines for months for a variety of reasons, but one of the most damning was a Wall Street Journal report about Kotick threatening to kill an assistant via voicemail. He's always been an asshole, seemingly downplaying the severity of Activision Blizzard's sexual harassment issues while courting an acquisition from Microsoft just days after the harassment report was filed. He was reportedly responsible for preventing those who were perpetrating sexual discrimination and harassment from getting fired while being shitty to women himself. He's the definition of a scumbag and an example of the industry's worst parts. It's awesome seeing high-profile figures not just demand better from the games industry, but rightfully calling out those who perpetuate harmful workplace environments. Things won't change until there are enough voices actively fighting for it. The one way to end abuse is to stand up for it. Yeah, for sure. I've never been a big fan of Greg Miller, and that's mostly a personal preference, just because there's somebody that I used to be kind of friends with, and I would never hear the fucking end of Greg Miller this, kind of funny that, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it was a little bit of professional jealousy, and I'm willing to let that kind of stand, but it just seemed like I couldn't get away from this guy. But I'm going to put some respect on this guy's name. Not only for what you've accomplished in the industry, but to openly use, like the article said, essentially the equivalent of the fucking Oscars to call Bobby Kotick a piece of shit publicly when Jeff Keighley wouldn't do the exact same thing. And I guess you could make the argument, well, the Game Awards have to pay for themselves and blah, blah, blah. It's a huge marketing event, whereas DICE is more industry people. It's more fancy-pantsy. But it carries a lot more prestigious weight behind it because there are people there from so many big companies. There's so many devs there. There's presidents. There's CEOs. There's people that make the game industry move in the shape of what it is today. So to have him up there with Jessica Chobot, who's a name that I'm pretty sure is well-liked and well-respected in gaming spaces, for him to just come out and say fuck Bobby Kotick, cool. I'm down with that. Now, I would have been a bit more verbally assaultive in what I would have said, like, fuck Bobby Kotick and his ripe old rural country asshole. Get the fuck out of my industry and never come back. That might have been something I would have said. Or to quote George Carlin, Bobby Kotick is the type of person who should be thrown screaming from a helicopter or beaten with heavy mining equipment. Would certainly be a thing that I'm pretty sure a lot of us could definitely stand behind. My guess is with Kotick, I think he's going to go to the energy sector, or he's going to go into high finance, and he's just going to be another asswipe you never hear from again. Or he's going to take his golden parachute and retire to Fuck You Island. Either way, get out of my damn face, you piece of shit. And our final story this week, before we get into the monumental net run of Alex's Cyberpunk 2077 review, this one comes courtesy of ZDNet.com. Thanks, Dad. Jammer used to stop kids going online wipes out a town's internet by mistake. The interesting control method could lead to a hefty fine and jail time. So this was posted last week. A father who used a signal jammer to rein in his children's internet use managed to wipe out an entire town's connectivity by mistake. The French agency Nationale de Frequencies, the organization responsible for managing radio frequencies in the country, received a strange complaint translated from a mobile phone operator. The carrier had detected odd signal drops that were impacting the telephone and internet services of residents in the French town of Messines. According to the ANFR, via bleeping computers, there was one strange detail that stood out in the report. Services were cut consistency from midnight to roughly 3 a.m. every day. As the residents slept, a member of the Toulouse Regional Services of the ANFR began walking the streets to investigate. While the examiner watched the clock tick over to midnight, their spectrum analyzer equipment took on a familiar shape, revealing a jammer was in use. The waves emitted by the device were followed to a house in a neighboring town. The next day, one of the residents admittedly responsible revealed that he had purchased a multi-band jammer to prevent his teenage children from going online at night without permission. The father claimed that his teenagers had become addicted to social media and browsing the web since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, a situation potentially made worse due to the social restrictions and lockdowns. The jammer was intended to stop them from covertly using their smartphones to go online when they were meant to be asleep. However, the jammer also managed to wreak connectivity havoc for other residents and the neighboring town. By wanting to ban the internet in his home, he applied the same sentence to his entire neighborhood, the agency said. The problem is that using a jammer is not legal in France, and as a result, the man faces a maximum fine of 30,000, I guess this is euros, and even a jail term of up to 6 months. In another example of the town's residents' use of technology having inadvertent consequences, in 2020, telecom engineers spent 18 months frustrated and perplexed over the sudden but consistent disappearance of a Welsh village's internet at 7 a.m. every morning. It turned out that all the broadband and BT services endured hundreds of residents were caused by one individual who was turning an old secondhand television set at that time every day. The TV was sending out electrical bursts capable of disrupting signals. That's fucking, on one hand, kind of cool. On another hand, how the fuck did you get a hold of a multi-band jammer that can do this? That would scream to me that type of equipment should be restricted to paramilitary, police, or military use. I really can't see a reason for a civilian to own one. If you do, feedback at ThisWeekInGeek.net or hit me up on Twitter at BirdmanDod. I would love to hear a tech expert's opinion on why a civilian would need something like this. But that's a hell of a thing to knock out an entire town. Just from keeping your kid from browsing Pornhub or Reddit. Seems like a little bit of overkill. You know what you could do? Take their phones at night. Just an idea saying, hi, little Susie, hi, little Timmy, it's midnight, I need your phone. Now, there's a chance they may have a backup phone, like a burner, but you know what? You've done your due diligence. It's not like they're planning a mastermind world domination plan like Cobra or fucking Megatron. It's a cell phone. I'm sure there are dangerous consequences. I'm really sure that, online addiction is a thing. I've known several people who have been addicted to various aspects of the internet, and it turned out okay in the end, but still. Seems like a little bit of overkill, especially considering it's going to cost you a huge amount, and possibly you might end up going to jail. So I hope it was worth it. So with that brings to a conclusion this week's edition of the Nerd News Network. And I guess to sum things up, trans rights are human rights, and if you don't like that, fuck off. 2, fuck Bobby Kotick, and maybe sit down and talk with your kids first before you decide to become a technological terror, would be the big takeaways from this evening. So, we're going to take a listen to Alex's extended review of Cyberpunk 2077 on the next generation of consoles. And when we come back, the weird news that happened around the world this week. We will be back, guys, right after this.
Alex here, and if this sounds a little different, it's because I had to record a little different. I currently have some construction going on in my apartment, which has forced me to be a little more creative when reviewing and recording, mostly because where I've now set up my studio in the bedroom, the wall had a giant hole in it, so where we had plumbers come in earlier in the month, and then we have drywall people and then painting and stuff to do, and it made it so that a lot of the stuff that was stored in the closet of that room where everything went to crap, it also happened to be stuff that we had to put into the living room that would take up my other recording space. So I couldn't have my full rig. So you're getting a bit of a special review here in that I received a review code for Cyberpunk. Now, if you remember last year, has it been already a year? Maybe more than a year? 14, 15 months? When we did our discussion on it, we did not receive review codes for it, and I think at this point everybody knows the debacle that happened with how poorly that launched, to the point where we did our own little special on it about a year ago, discussing our different experiences. Me having played it, I think Birdman played it on, I think he was playing it on PlayStation at the time. I happened to play it on the Xbox Series X because I picked up my Series X, day one, and didn't have any other consoles. My PS5 was here, but I had pre-ordered the game on Xbox way back when I had the One X, and I was like, that's the best way to play this game before obviously the new consoles came out and everything was delayed. So just as a refresher for that, because I'm going to use this as a comparison, I had the game crash on me on the initial launch. We're talking in the months of December into January of last year. I had it crash probably 150, I'm not exaggerating, 150, 200 times, to the point where it would just crash my game completely, exit out on the Xbox, or on rare occasions lock the system up until it froze, until it crashed after, and even necessitating 3 times where I remember this, 3, maybe it was actually 4, 3 or 4 times where I had to physically unplug the console from the wall because it bricked the entire system. And that was playing it from a disc, using obviously the Xbox One version, played in backwards compatibility. When it ran, the frame rate was wildly unstable, major glitches, couldn't complete main quest storylines because they were broken and had to be hot fixed in day by day almost. We know how bad it was. It was an absolute horrendous experience, except the frustrating part being that the story was pretty compelling for what was there. And we went on and discussed how there were concepts that weren't as realized as they should have been. And, we really, even if we had been given a review copy, it would have been hard to review because we try to review every aspect of the game, including the full storylines. And when you have 2 team members on 2 different platforms playing and getting wildly different missions that are broken, we couldn't even get a full picture of what was happening. Now, with 14 months in, we had the opportunity now to go back. I did do a complete play, as complete as I could initially on the Xbox. Saw the ending, or saw actually every ending, except for the secret hard ending. And now I went, okay, maybe I'll be able to play this and see what this transition is like. And I'll tell you this, it's interesting. I still encountered a few issues, and they were prominent issues from my first playthrough, and this is supposedly the best version that's patched. So I'll tell you this, I downloaded the code that I was given, which was actually for the PS4, and then you use the PlayStation free upgrade to a distinct PS5 code version. So I had a chance to check out the PS4 version. I wanted to see what the experience was like starting it on there in backwards compatibility on my PS5. And interestingly, it's one of the first games I've seen this happen with. I think one other game that I'm working on a review for right now also did it. When you save your PS4 game and you close out of the PS4 distinct app and you open the PS5 app, there's no uploading to a server to get a new save, or no built-in click this button to import your save with a weird menu. It just read the PS4 save files off of the system as if they were native PS5 saves. And then when you go to save a new manual save, you'll create a distinct PS5 version. That is pretty cool. That's actually what we were hoping for, outside of what happens on the PlayStation or the Xbox, where everything is just one cloud save and it auto does the tracking, conversion, whatever for you. This is actually better than some of the native PS5 games from Sony themselves. So I was, pleasantly surprised with that. But as far as encountering other issues that I mentioned, there are some. There's a visual glitch where sometimes after certain events a black rectangular box will appear on the middle of your screen, and you can't get rid of it. It almost looks like your screen, like your actual LCD is broken. And I'm like, oh no, because I know this from this was part of my notes from back before. They didn't fix that, and the only way to fix it, it'll stay there for the whole game that you play, is you have to you have to save your game, not exit the game, or not exit your save and reload. You have to physically close the game down and reopen it. Luckily, on the new consoles, it's pretty fast. It's like at least a third. It's only about a third of the speed of the load times that I experienced before, so that's good. There's, with the two visual modes, there's the fidelity mode, which is the ray tracing one that I believe it runs at like 1440p with 30 frames per second. It looks nice, but I switched over to performance mode simply because it was a lot smoother experience. And to be honest, I didn't like the ray tracing is so minimal that I didn't notice it unless I was like standing still in a well lit area. So it's to me, it's a non-starter. I don't know if it's different on the Xbox that way, but it was so minimally different that I actually I much preferred the faster pace. And I know a lot of people argue first-person shooter, it needs to be 60 FPS. If it's cinematic enough and it's really immersive, but there's such a slight difference in how it looked to me, I'd rather go for the native 4K with 60 on there. As well as I turned off HDR because the HDR doesn't work right. And I'm just 100% positive the tone mapping doesn't work the way it's supposed to. On other HDR games on PlayStation, your TV is basically always in HDR mode, unless you go in manually and select to the setting to make it dependent. It'll detect if the game supports it or not. And I had it because I've got my system basically always set to have it on. It is always on, but when you turn it on in the game, it still makes everything look washed out. And I played around with the luminance settings. I played around both on the television and memorizing where my spots were for everything else, and in the game. I could not get the tone mapping to look as good with HDR on in the game as it did with it off. And that's the first time I've ever encountered that. So something's wonky about how they implemented it, where it probably works on the Xbox if I were to have a version of that to play on there, because the Xbox is like Dolby certified and everything, but it does not work right on the PlayStation. Leave that off, and it'll look fantastic with the fake auto HDR stuff that they do on the PlayStation itself. It just looks worse when you have it on natively. So no bueno. Do not like. That's a little bit of a nitpick. As far as other glitches and errors, I did have it freeze the way it happened on my Xbox a year ago. I had it freeze about 3 or 4 times where it completely borked the screen. It got stuck where the audio stopped, and it was just like a freeze frame of the screen. And I had to manually exit the program and start up again. And luckily, it keeps a pattern of about 4 or 5 recent saves in the manual saves, and it sort of cycles through them. So you're never too far behind. But it was surprising, but at the same time, it felt like it was the same thing that happened when I was playing the pre-release review copy of Ratchet & Clank and a few of the other even first-party Sony titles that happened in the first 6 to 7 months of release of the console, where there was some sort of glitches in these games where they would freeze when they were rapidly trying to load data from the SSD or write to it. I don't know if it's when it was calling a save point to actually save it, or if it was when it's loading in asset data. I don't have the ability to check that. It's just, I know it's when you're running or going through an area quickly. When some new data is loading in, it would freeze like that. Now, that happened on the original launch edition on my Xbox. That's what happened about 3 or 4 times there too, where it would freeze like that and I had to close it. But it happened like 200 times where it would just bloop and die on me on there. I didn't have it up and die. I didn't have it ever up and completely crash here, where the system knew it crashed. I had it happen 3 or 4 times where it just borked out, and then I had to start from loading it up again. So 3 or 4 times versus a couple hundred, it is way more stable now. But this shouldn't be happening. It still shouldn't happen at all. For the amount of care they've had to put in to fix it, it shouldn't. But again, your mileage may vary. I know that there's some variances depending on the consoles. But The only way I was able to check to see if I could replicate it is the first 3 times it happened, I had the game data installed on the internal, like, stock SSD that the PlayStation comes with. And then I decided, let me see, is it a problem maybe with my SSD? And I then transferred moved the entire game data to the M2 slot SSD that I have in there, which is the Samsung 980 Pro. It is a faster SSD than what actually comes inside the PlayStation. It is well cooled, certified. It's basically the best one you can put in there. It's just not a super high capacity, but it's just whatever. And it happened one time there while I was playing on my 40 plus hour playthrough. And I was like, okay, so it's still a problem with the game. It's not a problem with how, maybe some data on drive or something. Now there's something not right with how it's calling. There's some glitches. But again, it's rare enough that if this is how it launched, if this is how the game had launched a year ago, people wouldn't have been complaining. People would have been like, there's a few glitches, they'll iron it out. But it is still surprising that this far out and after all these patches, they launched this and it's still kind of happening. But again, that's just, don't read it too much. I just want to err on the side of caution and explain that, yes, I'm still having a few issues with it. Now that is out of the way, I'll get into the good. I was able to do everything. I was actually able to do a full playthrough, do every single mission. I didn't do all the gigs because they don't affect the story, but I was able to do all the missions without any glitches, especially in Totencom. Was Totencom? What? There's a mission on Johnny's quest line near the end of the game, and that's the one that was broken, like really broken. You couldn't complete it. You get stuck in there and you'd lose your save files. It just works. I was able to do a few other missions that I wasn't able to do before, like, for instance, was it Gary, the homeless crazy person? I wasn't able to do his mission originally because he would just randomly die and disappear. I used to have quest markers in certain areas that would lead to nowhere because it wouldn't activate whatever was supposed to happen. They doesn't seem to do that. It just all worked. Same with the roller coaster. I wasn't able to ride it in my first game because the NPCs that you interact with to start that mission just were never there originally. It all works now. It all works flawlessly. Frame rate wise, I very rarely saw it stutter or dip. It works better than it ever has. It works as if I would have wanted it to when it launched. I was able to do a slightly different playthrough. I played as I guess you would say like a male dominant character versus last time playing as the female dominant. I still messed around with the character type a little bit, but that was who I played as V the first time, because this way I could get different romance options. And I actually did better on this playthrough, obviously knowing what was going to happen with some of the plot lines, and that I was able to save Takamura. I was able to save him where I didn't do that before, and got vastly different dialogue and endings, and it was actually really, I was actually really impressed with it. I also saved. I've drawn a blank on his name, but Takamura's friend instead of killing him. So he shows up later on. There's extra little pieces of dialogue here and there. And the big difference this time is I focused really, really hard on using basically only swords for everything. Knowing how and like how much I would need to raise the cool factor and the ninjutsu and the blades to do what I would say is the true ending. I mean, the endings people say where you go off with Pan Am, they're like, oh, it's sort of happy. The true ending is, can you do it where nobody dies? And the only way to do it where nobody dies, not a single person, not an NPC that you're friends with or anything, is to do the suicide run, Don't Fear the Reaper ending. And that's the one where you sit for a while for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then you get the option to do that secret mission. And when I did that the first time, I had my ass handed to me on my Xbox playthrough a year ago. It was hilarious because your health starts out like 20% less than normal, and then for each checkpoint section, it reduces another 10% or so, to the point where when you're fighting Atom Smasher at the end, you're at about 50% health max, and even if you heal above it, it automatically lowers it to that. And the enemies are coming at you all hard. You don't have any support characters to draw their attention or fire at all, and you fight more because you don't use alt or anybody to wipe out all the mechs at the beginning and stuff. So like when I first played that last year and I ran in, I killed like 2 enemies and then I was swarmed and just completely obliterated. This time I was smart. I got all of the I got a health expansion in one of my augmentations where it doubled or had 50% health. And then I had one that for every enemy that you kill, restore 3% of your health. And then I had other ones that perks that go in with the cool factor and blades and that do the same. So no matter how much they're shooting at me, plus I took all my armor and all of my clothing and armor, I fitted entirely with armadillo mods so that it would just increase my armor by 60 or 70 for each one, each mod installed. And I had like 10 of them installed. So they're only taking like 10 health off of me. So I went in there with like 750 maximum health instead of the regular 400 or so that I would have had. And I am slicing and dicing and I am obliterating. I creamed the end. I'm playing it this time. I played it on normal. I played it on easy when I first played the game when it came out because we had a lot of stuff going on. And I was like, you know what? Let me try the game on normal this time and see what the standard playthrough was. And doing it the sword way, you just absolutely obliterate people. And I was destroying the mechs. Like there's like 4 or 5 of them that drop. And when they dropped in my playthrough a year ago, I got hit once and they one-shotted me to death. I ran up and I'm one-shotting them with my sword, doing 25,000 damage with crits. So I basically just absolutely obliterated them. Had a ton of fun, got to the end, got unique dialogue, was able to make my choice to... The way I see the true ending is, at this point, spoilers if you haven't played, I'm sorry, you've had a year, I guess. It's been pretty stable on PC for a while, but everything else was kind of crap, obviously. But I did the suicide run, beat up... beat Atom Smasher in like 3 or 4 hits. Got to see the unique dialogue, got to see one of the few unique pieces, went to the end, and then I chose to take my body, and because I was on such good terms with Johnny, he was fully acceptance of it, and he went off beyond the black wall. And when I came to it, did the ending that I believe is canon, where you've become the legend. And the unique factor here is for you to get this ending where you become the legend, Rogue always dies, except if you run the suicide mission yourself and you can survive. Because if you do that, you go to the afterlife, and instead of you owning or running the place, Rogue is still there, and you have a drink and you toast Johnny or Jackie, and it seems like you're basically finally working with her on jobs. You've become that legend, and then you go off to do the space mission where you're going to take down the Arasaka casino, and then it ends with that blaze of glory where you're flying towards it with your gun. To me, this is where I would think if they're making more DLC, which they said they are, I think it's going to be what happens after this, because it's hinted at that what for whatever reason you're doing this, that there's something very big in it for you, and we're not like, you've already become the legend. You might only have a few months left to live, maybe even less. I think it's hinted that you might be able to get a new body, and that's why you're doing this crazy mission if you survive it. But yes, that's, spoiler ending, sorry for anybody, but I had a very good time playing that. It is a much smoother gameplay. The controller makes all the difference. Driving is still a little wonky, but the adaptive triggers are really well implemented in the game, as are... The rumble features are so much more precise, and the haptic feedback is really, really well done. Audio-wise, it felt a little less compressed than when I played it, even in backwards compat. So it sounds great. There again, some little visual glitches aside, a couple little crashes here and there, something you can look past. I think it's pretty much ready. if you're looking to get it, you can get the free upgrade by purchasing it on PS4 or on Xbox, and you can upgrade it. As of when I'm recording this on the PlayStation Store, they're running the PS5 version for $29.99 Canadian, which is a pretty good deal, actually, considering what you get. I'm interested to see what they come up with DLC or further expansions, how that's going to work, price points, and if it's great. But, if you're still on the fence, they're basically like one patch away from probably getting rid of any of these visual hiccups or things that I was talking about. So I think it's finally ready to go. If you've been somebody who's held off buying it and you're upset with me for talking about my playthrough, sorry, but too bad. You've had a year. And if you're somebody who played through it and then just didn't want to do another playthrough because you had too many issues, now is probably the time to pick it up again and upgrade it if you've got a next-gen console.
Go crazy?
Don't mind if I do!
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria!
All right, thank you, Alex, for that extended look into Night City here on ThisWeekInGeek.net. I'm still your host, Mike the Birdman. Are you ready for some of the weird and strange, fucked up things that happened around this planet this past week? Well, have I got some stories for you. So, from the website web3isgoinggreat.com, former owner of reportedly stolen Bored Ape Files' $1 million lawsuit against OpenSea. Businessman Timothy McKimmey is the former owner of Bored Ape 3475, an NFT he purchased on December 5th for 55 ETH, then about $232,000. In a lawsuit against OpenSea, McKinley alleged that on February 7th, a security vulnerability allowed an outside party to illegally enter through OpenSea's code and access the plaintiff's NFT wallet in order to list and sell the plaintiff's Bored Ape at a literal fraction of the value. The Bored Ape was purchased for 0.01 ETH, so that's Ethereum, I think, or about $30, then flipped by the alleged thief within hours for 98.9 ETH, a bit over $300,000. McKimmey alleges that OpenSea knew about the reported vulnerability and failed in their duties to him as a customer by not informing the customers of the issue or by shutting down the platform while it was purportedly vulnerable. The lawsuit argues that Bored Ape 3475 has a higher rarity score than one supposedly purchased by Justin Bieber for 500 ETH or 1.3 million in January. The value of 3475 is arguably in the millions of dollars and growing as each day passes. The lawsuit seeks any and all damage to which McKinney may be entitled, including the return of the Bored Ape, damages equivalent to the value of the Bored Ape, and/or monetary value or monetary damages over $1 million. NFTs are fucking stupid. We have an open policy here at TWIG, as Alex has gone into great impassioned rants over. We do not like NFTs. These things are fucking scams. They're a JPEG with a certificate of authenticity. Now, there are some NFT authors that I know, and some of their work is legitimately kind of cool, but this Bored Ape Yacht Club is fucking dumb. You spent $232,000 on a fucking picture on a blockchain that is not even secure. Why? You could have bought a house with that money. You could have donated that money to fucking Ukraine. You could have done so many more good things with this money, but no, you decided to buy a vanity project of a fucking JPEG. You fucking idiot. My God, I hope you don't get this money. I hope the judge laughs you out of court. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm going to be on the wrong side of history on this one, but this is fucking dumb. Just because it has a higher rarity score than Bieber's, because this one has a quote-unquote different hat, I want you to say that out loud and really think about how stupid that sounds. One of the shows that I watch, and I reference on the show frequently, is Internet Today. And I think they said at one point in the last month that NFTs are going to be like the fucking Beanie Babies of this generation, where people are going to be dividing their NFT wallets when they get divorced or separated or whatever. Like, you're handing over file codes. No one's going to give a fuck about these things. There is no great Mona Lisa or Leonardo da Vinci of the NFT world. That I'm aware of. I guess maybe if that Banksy guy does something. But even then, fuck right off. You can right-click and do that. Hell, Twitter has NFT avatars if you really want to go that far. And you can turn anything you have into an NFT if you just have to register it with the blockchain somewhere. I should really do a Stickman thing of NFTs just to prove it as a giant fuck you, but it's so stupid. Timothy McKimmy, bite my ass in your Bored Ape while I'm at it. Just fuck off, dude. This one comes courtesy of CNN. This is a little bit different and a little bit more painful, so graphic stuff coming in. Cross-country skier Remy Lindholm suffers frozen penis at mass start race. This story comes courtesy via Reuters. The men's 50-kilometer mass start race at the Beijing Games was shortened to 30 kilometers, but that did little to help Finland's Remy Lindholm, who needed a heat pack at the end of the race to thaw out a particularly sensitive body part. Lindholm spent just under an hour and 16 minutes traversing the course in howling, freezing winds, leading to his penis becoming frozen for the second time in a cross-country skiing race following a similar incident in Ruka, Finland last year. You can guess which body part was a little bit frozen when I finished the men's Olympic 50-kilometer race. It was one of the worst competitions I've ever been in. It was just about battling through, he told Finnish media. When the organizers worried about frostbite during Saturday's race, it was delayed by an hour and shortened by 20 kilometers. The thin suits and underlayers worn by racers, as well as plasters to cover their faces and ears, offered little protection. Lindholm explained that he used a heat pack to thaw out his appendage once the race was over. When body parts started to warm up after the finish, the pain was unbearable, he added. Just holy shit. And this is the second time this has happened. And I guess there's certain things you can only wear under this thing. I mean, I guess it's not like a wetsuit where you can put like, hot water pumping through it. So I guess that would slow you down or something. But Jesus, my God, having your penis frozen in a race for cross-country skiing. And I'm sure there's a whole psychology behind competing and being an Olympic champion and all sorts of cool accolades that I will never understand because I'm happy just being good at fucking Nintendo at this point. But to lose your penis over cross-country skiing, that's a thing. I also heard somewhere is when your penis or when appendages start to thaw out from frostbite, there's like a shock effect that you get from all the blood and the sensation coming back in at once. And it's supposed to be ludicrously fucking painful. No thank you, sir. I am not ready to take care of this. No way, no how. No! Anyway, that's all I got to say about that. Hopefully he's recovered and, we'll pick a warmer sport. May I suggest synchronized swimming? All right, so our final story this week, this one's kind of funny. This one, again, comes courtesy of CNN. Hank the Tank, a 500-pound bear, has broken into more than 24 homes, police say. Now, there is an update to this story I will provide at the end. You may know him as Hank the Tank, but the California Department of Fish and Wildlife knows him as a threat to a Lake Tahoe neighborhood. For months now, the 500-pound black bear has been roaming the streets in the Tahoe Keys area of South Lake Tahoe, about 100 miles east of Sacramento. In the span of 7 months, the animal caused extensive damage at 33 properties and fortunately entered at least 28 homes, according to a February 17th blog post by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. The South Lake Tahoe Police Department told CNN on Tuesday it believes Hank is responsible for more than 2 break-ins over the weekend. A Facebook post by the department says he broke through a small window and somehow squeezed inside a house Friday when no one was there. He did not break into the garage, however, which is where the trash was kept. Officers banged on the exterior of the home until he left through a back door. And Saturday, he is believed to have broken down a front door to enter another home. Police said they haven't confirmed that the bear is Hank yet, but believe it is likely him. There have been no direct attacks on humans or pets in the area, and the Fish and Wildlife Department said. Residents have flooded police lines with worried calls. The Wildlife Department has said it has received more than 100 individual reports that the bear have come in to South Lake Tahoe police. Wildlife Department spokesperson Peter Tira told CNN they have been tracking incidents with the black bear since spring 2021. The incidents primarily occurred during the spring and fall of 2021, where the bear was in hyperphagia, adding calories to survive the winter, Tira said. Hyperphagia, according to the U.S. National Park Service, causes bears to eat and drink nearly nonstop during the fall in preparation for hibernation. The bear, according to the CDFW, has lost its fear of people and is associating people with access to food. His large size helps him break into homes as he can push through front doors and garage doors. In October, a California woman was mauled by a different black bear that broke into her Northern Lake Tahoe cabin and rummaged through her kitchen. The woman suffered scratches and other wounds all over her body. There are a few options to keep the community and bear safe: relocation, placing the bear in a facility, or euthanasia. This last option has local bear advocacy groups such as the Bear League concerned. Ann Bryan, executive director of the group, told CNN affiliate KCRA the bear does not have to die. The Bear League reached out to the director of an excellent out-of-state wildlife sanctuary who agreed he has room and would be very willing to give the bear a permanent home, Bryant told KCRA. However, the Wildlife Department said relocation comes with a lot of requirements and can take a toll on the animal's mental health. According to KCRA, the Bear League has offered to pay all relocation expenses. While the Lake Tahoe area has a healthy and dense bear population, euthanizing the animal is always our last option, Tira said. If the Wildlife Department does not capture the bear, it said it will evaluate the possibility of moving him into the out-of-state facility. It is said his current location as of Friday is unknown, but the last reported sighting was a few days ago when he was walking down a street in Tahoe Keys. The department is advising residents in the area to stay vigilant and responsibly store and dispose of food, as bears are driven by scent. Now, there was an update to this story, and I saw this the other day, that all these home break-ins may not be all caused by Hank, because they're using DNA evidence, and they said there's at least 2 other bears that could very well be responsible for these, not just Hank. They both happen to be big son of a bitch and bears, though, so that's a thing. Obviously, if you don't have to kill this wonderful animal, please don't. It hasn't hurt anybody yet, and if it can live a happy and fulfilling life at a wildlife sanctuary, then sure, go for it. I think that's a much better option than, pumping them full of lead or something like that, or something equally as horrible. But obviously, human lives have to be considered first and foremost here. So hopefully the California Department of Fish and Wildlife can take care of this. Hopefully the South Lake Tahoe Police Department will not go in guns blazing with this thing unless there's a danger to actual people or pets or something like that. Because, if something were to happen to Wiley, I'd fight this son of a bitch with my bare fists. Pun intended. So hopefully Hank the Tank will be recovered and he will be ushered away to a land with plentiful food, a nice place to be, and he'll be safe. So, Hank the Tank, thank you for providing a very interesting perspective during all this. You're living your best life eating garbage, but that's okay. You're not hurting anybody yet. You're fucking up grandma's house. So anyway, we're going to take another small break here on the show, and we're actually going to take a look at a Nintendo Switch game that I got for review, and rather timely considering my current spiritual journey that I'm taking on as an Indigenous person. So we're going to take a look at Never Alone, the Arctic Collection, and we will be back, guys, right after this.
Iglesia nunam. Sude kanok enyonek put iloan.
Hey guys, this is Mike the Birdman here, and I'm here to talk about a game we got sent to us from our friends over at Eline Media on the Nintendo Switch. This is Never Alone, the Arctic Collection. And this is a special game because I've never seen a game tackle an Indigenous story or legend in this particular way. So this tells the story of an indigenous tribe in northern Alaska, the Inuit, I think it is. Not Inuit, because that's more Canada as far as I understand. And it's the story about this little girl and her fox spirit, how she wants to help her village, which has come under this terrible calamity. And it's really, really good. It's a physics-based puzzle platformer is how I would describe it. There's a little bit of quote-unquote shooting, but you're using like a traditional indigenous weapon called a bolo. Like, literally, like, you throw rocks and leather and you can entangle things. In this case, you can knock down barriers and stuff like that. But you can also play this game 2-player if you want, like 2-player co-op. One person can play as a little girl, one person can play as the fox spirit. And you can solve a variety of puzzles. There's like chase sequences, there's like weird spirit creatures, and you can even use some of these spirits as like platforms. There's like loon spirits and stuff like that. And there's also the DLC that originally came out with this, where you get to like canoe and stuff. So it's an interesting game. I've never seen anything like it, but what really sets it apart to me is as you progress through the game, you unlock things called cultural insights. And there are these little 2 to 4 minute stories from people from this northern Alaskan community about how the game came together, various aspects of their life. Like they'll talk about caribou clothing, how one of the people got stranded on an ice floe. They talk about climate change. They talk about the traditional weapons. They talk about the spirits up there. It's a really good learning tool. And I didn't expect it to be as engrossing as it was. And for me, I see this as rather fortuitous because as I've been undertaking my own indigenous spiritual journey right now, the animal or the totem that calls out to me as my guiding spirit right now, in my language, which is Ojibwe, because I'm a Anishinaabe, is Wagoosh. That's fox. And when Alex asked me if I wanted to review this, it was pretty much a no-brainer. Like, if there is a divine hand of creator involved in this, then I don't know what to tell you, because this seems pretty right on the nose to me. But Never Alone, the Arctic Collection, it's a good game. There are some problems with it, though. If I had to approach it from a pure gameplay standpoint, I did have some instances where my fox would load into the level and he might be falling down a pit endlessly. I was able to fix that by restarting a checkpoint. I did have some trouble with some of the jumps. Some of the shooting is really imprecise using the bolo. Like, it's not like any other game you'd get like a like targeting crosshair. You don't get that here, so you really gotta hope you hit the target. Otherwise, you're gonna be replaying the same section more than a few times. There was a section very early on where you're running away from a guy who attacks your village, and you have to bust down these ice things, and I almost gave up there, but luckily I did stick it through. The game is fairly short, though. You will beat this in just a couple of hours. Same with the DLC. It's not very, very long at all. But I do think this is a hidden gem, and it turns out it's been out for a while. It's just the first time it's ever been ported to the Switch. I do think it's worth it. If you can find this game, and you've got the budget for it, once again, this is called Never Alone, the Arctic Collection. I really think it's worth it. If you ever have had any curiosity towards indigenous communities, especially those of the far north, this is definitely worth it to you. It's worth it alone for the cultural insights, I think, especially because they drip feed you at just the right amount. The further you progress, the more cool things you'll learn, and it's worth it. Plus, Foxtails having that DLC is there. That's neat. And there's supposedly a second one in development now. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what this team comes up with next. So Never Alone, the Arctic Collection, gets a hearty recommendation from us here at This Week in Geek.
And now for something completely different.
And that's the kind of show it has been here on ThisWeekInGeek.net. Once again, I've been your host, Mike the Birdman. It's weird not doing the show with Alex here, just having someone to bounce off of. And I've been almost totally alone this entire time, actually, just kind of hanging out, waiting for Blair and my sister Shannon to come home. So I don't know what I'm going to do for the rest of my day. I know I've got that Shadowrun game to prepare for my group here in Guelph. I'm hopefully going to have some fun with that as I run that every other week. Basically, I have 1 week on with Shadowrun, 1 week on with Stargate, and we'll see which campaign goes the longest, more or less, right now. One of them I have to be Dancing Monkey to make you guys entertained. Hopefully you really enjoyed the last episode of Stargate TWIG, and I'd love to hear some feedback from that. So if you want to tag me on Twitter or email, it's at birdman.on on Twitter, or feedback at thisweekingeek.net. And before I go, I have to remind you, if you want to win 3 months of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, these codes are courtesy of Xbox Canada, please email feedback at thisweekingeek.net. Tell us your favorite Halo memory. I'm sure you like the Master Chief. Maybe you had a crush on Cortana. Hell, maybe you had a crush on Sergeant Johnson. And who the hell wouldn't? There's just a lot of cool things about that franchise. I hope you'll share with us some of the responses we will read here on the show next Sunday. When we record. Alex has literally just texted me a few seconds ago, said he is off the Twig grid until next week. He's at his mom's. His mom retired today. I think she's 60 something. So congratulations to Mama Ricci. You've definitely earned your long rest. So go rest our heroes. You've played a great game and saved our civilization. To quote the Ghostbusters game on the NES. We definitely appreciate it. So coming up on the show this week, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to cover. I do have The One Ring, which is the Lord of the Rings RPG that I got from Free League. I've got Star Trek Adventures. I got the player's guide for that. I got this awesome 3-pack of books from Wizards of the Coast for Dungeons and Dragons, including the new Monsters of the Plane manual or something like that. I'd have to take a little bit of a closer look at it. I know Alex has a shit ton of games for him to take a look at. I'm still kind of on the fence about some games right now. I'm deciding whether I want Pokemon Arceus or do I want to wait and get something else, because Blair, my wife, is allowing me to get one game for Valentine's Day and I didn't pick anything yet. So I still have that option if I really want to pull that trigger and do something fun. So I guess before I sign off today, I just want to reiterate, Twig and all of us here at the show definitely stand with the people of Ukraine. If you want to contribute, I highly suggest you look on your Facebooks, look in your local city, see if there's any organizations you can donate to, maybe the Red Cross or something like that. Basically any humanitarian effort that can help, or go to some of these protest marches if it's safe for you to do so and show your solidarity. If you want to patronize Ukrainian restaurants in your area, that's an option. And I saw this option come up too. If you see a Russian person or a Russian restaurant, you don't have to be jerks to them, because odds are they don't want this either. They are here wherever you are. They're just trying to survive. And I saw something really interesting, and I invite you folks to go take a look at this. It was on the APTN, which is the Aboriginal People's Television Network up here in Canada. And there's a very unique bond between Indigenous populations out in Saskatchewan and areas and the Ukrainian people. And it was a really interesting piece. And it actually had a conversation going on my Facebook between two people of Ukrainian descent. And they didn't know about the connection and bond that we share. So during this difficult time, I most certainly hope you will help the most vulnerable, the people that are worried and scared for what's going to happen back home. And to follow up to the other story, I want you to amplify those websites that can help people that are experiencing trouble in Texas. If you happen to be a trans youth, or if you're a parent of a transgendered youth or person, or I'm not sure what the proper terminology is there, but help them out. Basically, as we roll forward into March, I know the world's a crazy place, and I know there's a lot of bad things happening, but you don't have to be a part of that. You can help people by doing something important, whether that's showing solidarity, having an open ear, protesting, doing something meaningful, doing something that shows support. It means something to these people. And just to know that one of the most badass presidents in the world is the voice of Paddington Bear is kind of inspiring. And I guess before I go, I also saw this. I saw a Ukrainian soldier with a Ghostbusters patch on their uniform, and another one, it was a Ukrainian soldier with a kitty on her shoulder saying, this is my spotter. So that's good. And that's, I guess, one more minor thing. If certain people, I know in Poland, who are escaping from the Ukraine, they were advised that they want to bring their pets. Their pets don't require passports. So there's a special place in Poland that you can go and your pets can cross over the border. They don't have to worry about things. So your pets didn't have to get left behind as terrible things happened. So what's going to happen in the following week, I don't know. But what I can tell you is we will be back next week, hopefully with Alex. And I hope things are better in some capacity. I really don't have the words to accurately describe everything, but that's just kind of the world that we currently live in. So I will leave you, my friends, today with everything that I've said. And I mean this in the most sincere way possible. Please be excellent to each other. So for ThisWeekInGeek.net, I've been Mike the Birdman, and I'll catch you guys again next week, only on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at ThisWeekInGeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@ThisWeekInGeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.